Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.
The Supreme Court on Tuesday said that NGOs will now fall under the purview of the Right to Information Act in a bid to bring in more transparency in the sector. This comes soon after the Home Ministry tightened FCRA norms further and said any NGO which is applying for an FCRA license should ensure and should declare that none of its members are involved in any activities to do with religious conversion. What are all these changes about? What are the implications of these changes and how do they differ from the existing norms? That's what we're looking at today in Government Matters with me, Ruhi Tiwari. Ananya Bharadwaj, a Home Ministry specialist, is in the studio with me today. Ananya, to begin with, what really did the Supreme Court say about NGOs in the RTI Act? What are the current norms and how would things change going forward now?
Ruhi, the Supreme Court ruled that the NGOs will now fall under the RTI Act, which means that if a person is filing an RTI seeking information on the finances received by the NGO and its activities, then the NGO will be bound to reply to that. So this verdict came after DAV College Trust had moved the Supreme Court saying that they are not a public authority. Basically, High Court had said that they are a public authority, against which they moved this petition in the Supreme Court. But it was set aside by Supreme Court saying that you have been receiving substantial amount of government funding for running your schools and colleges, which is why you are bound to reply to all of these queries that come to you regarding your funding, the amount of money that you have been receiving or spending on these activities. So till now, NGOs did not fall under this ambit, but after the Supreme Court ruling, the Supreme Court has clarified that these organizations who are substantially funded by the government will fall under the RTI.
Right. So essentially till now NGOs were not under the RTI and going forward they would be bound to reveal information, as you said, filed through an RTI application.
Provided they are substantially funded by the government.
Okay. Now Ananya, earlier this week the Home Ministry also tightened FCRA norms and brought in fresh conditions. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yes, Ruhi, recently Ministry of Home Affairs came out with these guidelines that any person who's running an NGO or is a part of it has to file an affidavit saying that he has not been involved in any of the religious conversions, activities of religious conversion, or prosecuted for any communal disharmony. So this is in fact a step ahead taken by the Ministry of Home Affairs for tightening these guidelines when it comes to seeking an FCRA license, that this affidavit was not there initially. Also, we have seen a series of strict action taken by the government as far as these FCRA licenses are concerned. Like in 2018, we have figures, 155 registered associations were suspended for violation of FCRA norms. The licenses were cancelled for many of these NGOs. In fact, if we look at Kashmir, NIA, we had done a story that NIA is now going to go after these NGOs wherein they have been receiving funds from Pakistan. So they said that they have identified a couple of NGOs who were creating unrest in the valley by getting these funds from across the border, and when they went into their audit reports, they checked their account details and bank details. They found that they had violated these FCRA guidelines, which is why a report was then sent to the Ministry of Home Affairs saying that these NGOs need to be these guidelines and these rules need to be, there has to be a regulation for these NGOs working, receiving funds from outside. There has to be some sort of accountability, which is why this decision was made that they'll be tightening these rules as far as FCRA guidelines are concerned.
So Ananya, clearly there has been an attempt by this government to sort of deal with NGOs in the sector with some sort of an iron fist. To understand the process, what happens once you identify or flag these FCRA violations? What has happened going forward in the cases that you've mentioned?
So as we said, Ruhi, in 2018, 155 FCRA violations NGOs were suspended for FCRA violations. However, if you look at the statistics, only 2 cases of FCRA violation actually reached the Central Bureau of Investigation for further probe. So one case was the Lawyers Collective, Indira Jaisingh's NGO. that was booked this year. The allegations being that they not only violated the FCRA, guidelines, but also there was a criminal conspiracy. The money was laundered. It wasn't used for the purpose it was received. Yeah. So that was a case. In fact, Deepak Talwar, who was recently extradited from Dubai and was also accused in the Augusta Westland case, was also his is another case that was under the that had these FCRA violations. So only 2 cases that actually reached the CBI for further probe. So FCRA violations, if we look at the history, they do not reach these investigative agencies for further probe.
But why is that? What happened to the other 153 cases?
So in those 155 cases, Ruhi, the probe, as I said, has not reached the CBI yet.
153, because two have reached.
Yeah, so the investigation in that is still on. In fact, it's a long drawn process in which all the audit reports are checked, all the account details are checked, and then in most cases the license is cancelled. So first, if there's a question of, say, a violation, then it goes to the ministry, then a board sits down and verifies all the documents and the audit reports. Then the next step is to cancel that license. So that means that you will not be able to receive more funds. However, it does not often attract a criminal procedure or a case as such of say money laundering, like in this case of Indira Jaising, that the funds have been misused or the funds have not been used correctly. Right. So which is why we are saying that in these cases 155 cases, only 2 have reached the CBI. So the investigation in fact in all these is still on, and if it reaches a conclusion, it would be maximum the cancellation of the FCRA license.
Right. Now, Ananya, besides of course what the Supreme Court has said, as we've talked about in this conversation, the centre has also been coming down a little heavily on NGOs. Is this specific to the Modi government? Because from what I remember of the 10 years of the UPA government, there was a bit of a dichotomous approach towards NGOs. Sonia Gandhi had a very pro-NGO stance. There were NGOs that were known to be close to the Congress. In fact, there were people heading NGOs who were part of the National Advisory Council, which was advising the government on crucial issues. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, however, had quite another stand. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
You're absolutely right, Ruhi. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, in fact, in 2012, had mentioned this case of Kudankulam nuclear project. He said they do not appreciate the need for an increased energy supply, which is why they were continuously targeting and opposing this project. So we have that interview in which he had alleged that NGOs opposed to the nuclear power project were funded by foreign countries. In fact, he had said the atomic energy program has run into difficulties because these NGOs, mostly I think based in the United States, don't appreciate the need for our country to increase energy supply. He had also said that there are NGOs often funded from the United States and Scandinavian countries which are not fully appreciative of the development challenges that our country faces. Right. So this is not the first time that the government has attacked these NGOs for receiving funds from outside, and then here in this case he's saying they've been impacting developmental projects.
So this clearly the suspicion towards foreign funded NGOs is something that has been a running change and is not new to the Modi government. But however, as Ananya pointed out, now stricter rules are in place for NGOs for FCRA licenses and FCRA clearances, and the Supreme Court also has now ruled that NGOs will fall under the ambit of RTI if they receive substantial government funding. Thank you so much for watching Government Matters. Log on to our YouTube channel for much more.